listening to Over the Oxer podcast with Tracy Cole for all things to do with the mind for equestrians. So big hello, big welcome to everybody for my 100th episode. Thank you ever so much for listening. Wherever you are, we are in 24 different countries around the world. We've almost got 10,000 downloads. So thank you. So kicking off today, I'm going to be answering some of your questions. There were quite a number of questions, so I'm going to split it over 2 episodes. And the first question came from Instagram, and it came from Living the Leo Loca. And the question was, do I have any tips for keeping a good mindset at the bigger events? This will be very useful with the upcoming area festivals and regionals. Okay, so if you were my client and you were sitting opposite me, the first thing that I would say is, what do you mean by good mindset? What do you mean by that? Can you be more specific? And I would be drilling down into what you thought of as a good mindset. And I'm going to do a bit of a mind read here, which is an NLP term for guessing. And I'm going to assume that you want confidence, enthusiasm, motivation, determination, those kind of things. And the bigger events, again, I would be honing in on that phrase, bigger events. Well, how big does the event need to be? Could it be at a local equestrian centre? Does it need to be a competition? Does it need to be a regional or a national? What are we talking? So again, I'm just guessing here that you're talking about fairly large events, like you say, the area festivals and regionals. One of the best things that you can do, and I know I bang on about this quite a lot, is to use visualization. Because the visualization is so important. And when you do it, make sure that you're actually inside the picture, so to speak. So you're not watching yourself. Make sure that you are on your horse riding. And I would say make sure that you can feel the horse beneath you. And move your arms and legs. Don't be static. Don't be sitting on a chair doing your visualization and be completely still. Feel your muscles tense as you give the aids. Feel what your horse would respond with. Look around. What are you seeing around the arena? And get used to those things. And so you would do it in real time. So it's going to take you several minutes, and you may do a visualization for your warm-up, and you may do a visualization for your test, but keep on at it. I know that in the start, it can be quite difficult to visualize for some people, and I'm one of those people, but try it for, say, 2 minutes or 3 minutes a day, because everyone could fit that in, and then build it up to 10 minutes. And the results speak for themselves. They really do. All the top horse people use visualization. And I was talking to somebody who's now a very top level dressage rider, and you would know their name. And they were explaining to me how sports psychologists encourage them to do visualization over and over and over again. If you want to visualize something that is a negative, so for instance, you want to recover well from your horse spooking, or let's say you're visualizing the warm-up ring and it's packed and you still want to feel confident, but you don't normally feel confident if it's very busy and there's lots of people with, big, strong horses racing past you, then visualize it by watching yourself first. And watch yourself, because this is what you do for something that's aspirational. This is what you want to do. And then for something that you could do potentially, you know how to do it physically, then go back to being inside the picture and feeling everything. So that's what I would say would be one of the best things to do. Okay, time for another question. gives us some fantastic equestrian tips. And her question is, what are the advantages and disadvantages of a mindset coach coaching others within a discipline or sport they too practice? For example, could you just as effectively coach a tennis player as you could an equestrian? That's a really interesting question, because I have coached people who are tennis players and I've coached people who are golfers and cricketers. So I've gone outside of sports that I actually practice, although I do have an interest in other sports. So I think the thing is understanding the blocks that each sport has. And obviously, if I'm talking to equestrians, because I ride myself, I understand what could be a block. I understand the potentials for where you would feel anxiety and where you perhaps feel more confident. And it's almost the same for the other sports as well. If I have a rough knowledge of those sports, if I have a better knowledge, for instance, I have a better knowledge of tennis and cricket than I do golf. I don't have a very good knowledge of golf, to be honest, but the person who came to see me wanted to feel confident between the different holes. So if he'd had a bad putt, let's say, if he'd racked up a cricket score, then he would feel awful for the next tee off. I hope I'm using the right terminology here. Golf is really not my sport, but it was that feeling between time that I could help him with. So I didn't necessarily need a good grasp of golf. I understood the problem that he was still thinking in his mind about what had just gone on. And that's something that we do in all sports. I mean, in equestrianism, it could be that you've done a round, whether it's dressage or show jumping, and you go and do the same round on a different horse, or the same horse, but maybe a different test or a different show jumping course. And you've still got the old one in your mind. So that wasn't too tricky to do, but I would agree that it does suit you better if you are practicing the sport or you've got a love of the sport, because you can really understand what's going on. So for instance, in cricket, I had somebody who couldn't let go of the ball. And I understand that, because as you're a bowler and you're making your way towards the batter, and the batsman is intimidating you just by their stance. Maybe this ball is really important. Maybe this is going to be for the match, or this is going to be a decider, or this is going to tell the batsman that you mean business. And you've got to get it right. And so this cricketer found it really difficult to let go. He did let go of the ball, but it was in his mind all the time. Don't let go until it's perfect. Don't let go until it's the right moment. So it's kind of like an obsession. And I've worked with cricketers as well who find it really difficult to come back after a bad match, after a match where, as a bowler, they were knocked all around the pitch, or as a batsman, they were out for a duck. And I understand that singularity of cricket where, although it's a team sport, you're very much on your own. So as a batsman, you're on your own. There isn't, like in football, a crew of players around you on your team. You're on your own. It's the same for the bowler. You're on your own. It's your performance. Nobody can help you in that moment. So I do understand that. So I think, in answer to your question, Maria, I think we need to have some knowledge to help people at a deeper level. I think that really helps us to get to grips with the problem, and for that sports person to really feel confidence in us as well, which obviously is so important. Okay, what about a third question? So this one's from Ashley. And Ashley was saying, what techniques would you recommend to help overcome the mental battle of getting back on a horse that you had had a bad fall from and got seriously injured, especially when you haven't owned the horse for very long and previously have doubted your own abilities? So a couple of things going on there. First of all, the battle, as you say, the mental battle, as you call it, after getting back on after a fall, and then the previous self-doubt that you've had leading up to that. So I think I'm going to say, it sounds like a cop-out, I hope it isn't, but getting back on after a fall like that, where you haven't bounced, I think you would be better off using a mindset coach. Now, I'm not trying to advertise here, but I do think that you want to steer clear of trying to do it yourself too much, because you might further ingrain those memories. So NLP or hypnotherapy would work beautifully if you are still going over and over that fall and aspects of that fall, and it is still playing on your mind. It's almost become like a trauma. It's almost like PTSD. Then I would seek out timeline therapy. So that's what I would do. So I don't really want to give you the exact technique here and now, because if you were my client, you would be sitting opposite me and I could adjust as we went through. How about the self-doubt when you've doubted your own abilities? So I'm assuming that your abilities are far greater than you think, but other people would say that you have all the ability to do this. Self-doubt can be put into the category of limiting beliefs. And I think that you might have just that one limiting belief, and it might be really specific and just some aspect of riding, or it might be part of a whole catalogue of similar limiting beliefs. In which case, what's really interesting is that you start to think about your limiting belief or beliefs, and you try to find the broadest belief. So, for example, somebody might say, I'm not good enough at competing my horse, but it might come under the umbrella term of I'm not good enough, that operates generally through different aspects of your life. And it might be that you can think about where that came from. So you need a quiet few moments. In fact, give yourself an hour. And I would have a pen and paper. You don't necessarily need to write, but sometimes the writing just occupies that conscious mind, gives it something to do, and the unconscious mind starts to work on the problem and starts to think about those behaviours, those self-sabotaging, limiting beliefs. I would start by asking yourself the question, how is it that I believe that? How is it that I believe that and others don't? Notice the question, how. How is it? Not why. I don't want reasons. How is it? And so where has this come from? Or possibly where has this come from? And once you think about those things, it probably has nothing to do with riding. It probably has something to do with when you were very young, maybe. Maybe there was some other activity that you were engaged with that you thought twice about doing. So, maybe you were playing as a kid and the other kids were on a rope swing and they were leaping off, and you suddenly thought, I don't know if I can do this. And it could be as simple as that. And once you know how that self-limiting belief works, how it operates, and the fact that it's probably quite old, probably completely unconnected from riding, then you end up seeing it as an abstract thought. You kind of think, gosh, that's kind of so far back in the past. It's wafer thin. It doesn't have any substance to it. Okay, I'm still following that pattern, but the reason for it was long ago and is long lost. And this is a very old belief, and you're talking yourself. I mean, I presume you're not that old, but you're making it sound like it's ancient. It's so old, this belief. And the reason for it is just from ages and ages ago. And there's no reason to have this anymore, because you have drawn a line in the sand and you have progressed beyond this. And you don't need that same limiting belief to stop you doing something like going on a rope swing. You want to have fun. Now, obviously, there are much deeper ways of getting rid of these things that hold us back. And that could be working with a mindset coach. Limiting beliefs are fairly deep in terms of our problems within our brain. They're a bit deeper even than emotions, because they tend to give us the emotions. So if you can work it out like that, and you can convince yourself that it was from so long ago and it's so irrelevant, then we can start to break it down. And it's also useful, when you've thought about where it might have come from, to also think about examples that are in direct conflict with that limiting belief. So with your self-doubt, all the times that you have done well. And this is where a pen and paper is often quite useful, as you list all the times that you have done well. And it could be in a riding specific context. It could be broader. But you think of one thing, and then you think of another, and you think of another, and you come back to it 2 minutes later and you think, oh, but I did that as well, and I did that. And it could be small things. It doesn't need to be that you got red ribbons every time. And sometimes, again, those counter beliefs are enough to collapse that limiting belief. So see how you get on. Okay, let's go for another question. One more question for today. And looking through my list, I can see I've not really broken the back of these questions. So I'm going to do another 1 or 2 episodes. Maybe I can do even more. I'll spread them out with these questions. So this question is from Sue. And Sue asked me, how do you stay resilient and forward-looking when you keep having setbacks, such as lame horses, saddle problems, or other stuff? And when Sue sent me the question, I replied to her and I said, oh gosh, that sounds like my horse. That's what I'm having at the moment. I haven't got lameness, but I've got all these saddle problems, and we're working through it. And I will get there. So how do you stay positive? Well, I think staying positive and being resilient isn't just one thing that you do. I think it's a number of things that you do inside your mind, and you do them consistently. So at first you do them every day, and then you do them less and less because you need them less and less. It becomes your go-to thinking style. So the first thing that I would say is to think about the controllables. And you probably knew that I was going to say that. So it's so important to think about what we can actually control. So I have some control, but not a lot of control, for instance, over my horse's saddle fitting problems, because I think that her tense back is due to something that she's eating, probably a lot of grass or something in the grass. So I'm investigating ways to ameliorate that, let's say. But there are certain things that are out of my control. And if something is outside of my control, like the day the saddle fitter comes and when I can get the first available appointment, then I can't put too much emphasis on that inside my own head. And I don't. Because what's the point? I almost think, well, what's the point? I can spend a lot of time and effort wishing for this day to come, but it won't come any quicker. So I'm very much thinking, what's in my circle of control? What can I have full control of? And then that's what I concentrate on. And although there are real irritations and annoyances outside of that, I have to let them go. I love the Winnie the Pooh quote, I am a bear of little brain. And I think that applies to me. And I can only hold so much in my brain at once. So I can't afford to hold those things because it squashes up everything else in my head. The second thing that I would say for resilience and forward looking and positive thinking is to really understand that when things go wrong, like the things that you mentioned, the lameness and so on, is to remain realistically optimistic. And that's easier said than done. I know it really is. And again, this is something that you practice constantly, consistently, so that it becomes part of your personality. And I think that just thinking about that being in the past, this has happened, the horse has gone lame, for example, and looking forwards, looking for the prognosis from the vet or whatever other professionals that you use, and then looking forward and getting used to looking forward and not looking back, and getting used to not thinking, I've got 6 weeks of book rest or whatever it is, and dreading it, but thinking, right, what can I do in those 6 weeks? Right, 6 weeks off riding so I can start to get physically fit. I can start to do more walking. I can start to do more yoga or equipilates. I can start to do more mindset. I can visualize because the mind doesn't know the difference between visualization and real life. So every time I visualize, my mind actually thinks I've just done a session. So it's quite nice. And I think looking towards those things is incredibly important. Looking backwards, looking at the problem more than the solution, looking at being inside a problem rather than having come through it, keeps us in that problem mindset more and more, makes us feel bad, doesn't have any use whatsoever, doesn't help us at all, and is often done from a standpoint of fear. And fear, as we know, is not very healthy. But looking backwards and seeing the problem will make it loom larger. It will seem worse than it is, and it will give us that anxiety. So again, it's learning to stop doing that. Literally say to yourself that old stop, and stop doing it. And thinking about what will happen once you're through this time. And I think with practice, and I emphasize the practice again and again, I know I'm like a broken record, but it is with practice that you experience these events and you can weather it. I'm not saying you're immune, and I'm not saying you don't feel deflated when these things happen. It's just that your bounceability, your ability to rise up and get back on your feet and start thinking forwards again is much, much quicker. So see how you get on. So those are my questions for today. I'm going to put everybody into a draw in just a moment, everyone who has sent me a question. And I'm going to pull out a lucky winner, and that person will have a 1-hour Zoom mindset session with me. So I'm rather excited. So let me just go ahead and get those names. Okay. So everyone who sent me a question, thank you so much. As I say, I will get around to your questions at some point if I haven't answered it today. And if I have answered it today and you're still unsure, just send me a quick message and ask me a further follow-up question. And maybe I can keep going with that question as well. I'll pop that on the podcast as a follow-up. So everybody has gone into an envelope. You might be able to hear that. There we go. There's my envelope. I'm going to shake up the names. I wrote everybody's name onto a little piece of paper, and I'm going to pull one out right now. So the winner it's Hannah. Hannah is from Petite Eventing. So Hannah, I will be contacting you and working out when we can do our Zoom call. So congratulations. Thank you ever so much for sending me a question. thank you to everybody else. Take care, and I will see you again really, really soon.